Hey everyone, it's Matt Carl at LeRoy Heritage Museum. It's been a while since I've done a video update of progress here at the hotel, and since a lot of us are stuck at home right now, it's a good time to just take time and take a look at what we've been doing. We just had finished up another 2 or 3 month long list of projects and work to be done just before the COVID-19 situation happened. And so we're kind of taking a break right now from major projects going on. So I thought it would be a good time to take a look at what we've done. We're here in the main exhibit room, or what will be the main exhibit room. And at this point in this room, pretty much everything is done leading up to drywall. Drywall will be the next thing to be done in this room. And everything else has been finished up in this last push during the winter, everything that needed to be done. So drywall has to be done, the ceiling will be painted, and then the flooring will be put down. So we're looking forward to that. But there's been a major change in this room, starting with the ceiling. This is the corner, as you might remember, that had a large gaping hole in it from well over 100 years ago, when a stairway had been cut into the ceiling to lead up to the ballroom. And that stairway had been taken out. It wasn't original anyway. And we had been left with a hole in the ceiling for several decades now. And so we had the ceiling repaired. The tongue and groove wainscoting in the ceiling was kind of a different kind of a wainscoting, and it had to be recreated. It had a bead on both sides, and so it wasn't something that you would just normally find. It had to be special cut. So if you look closely at it, you can see each piece has a bead on both sides. And so the green is the old, and then you can see the new that was created to match. And we think that turned out pretty well. Before that could even be put up, though, a large laminated beam had to be put into the ceiling. And if we turn around and look at the ceiling from this direction, just about a foot or two on the other side of that blue light box there in the ceiling was where a laminated beam had to go in. So when the stairway was cut into the corner of the room, they unknowingly weakened the floor structure of the ballroom in that end of the building. And so in order to make it strong again and ensure that it's not going to settle anymore after putting a new ceiling back up, the laminated beam was put in place, and that was 23 feet long. That's the width of this room. So it goes all the way across to the other side and supports that whole back end of the room. So that was a major project in itself. And of course, to get that in there, a lot of the ceiling that we thought didn't have to be touched had to be opened up in order to make all that happen. So there was a lot more work that had to be done as a result of installing that. But I'm glad that we did. We were able to take care of that structural issue, and we won't have any problem now. So after that beam got put into place up in this corner, new floor joists were put in, and all of the old material was taken out in that area that had been put in there back in maybe the 60s era in order to close it up. And so when we got the floor joists into place, then that really strengthened the floor, and that gave a place to attach the new ceiling to. And so this new wainscoting was all put into place, all the pieces were fitted back in. And in the midst of doing all of that, um, we had to run wiring for the ceiling lights at the same time while we had a chance to get that wire pulled through the ceiling. So there are blue boxes in the ceiling that you'll see, and they're all through the room. And so some of them are for hanging reproduction globe style lights, and others are for track lights that will run around this room. So that got done, as well as wiring got finished up for the fire system in this room. And so as a result of that, the fire system was able to be finished up, and you can see the smoke detectors in the ceiling, which are all operational. So once the ceiling wainscoting was finished up, then crown molding had to be done. And so what our original thought had been was that the crown molding would just be reinstalled where it had been taken off. Some parts to the crown molding were still up there, but after we got to actually looking at it, and the guys did the work, it was just a lot easier to completely take off what was left and replace it all together. And so they did a really good job of doing that, and we did make the crown molding almost the same size as it was before. A little bit different pattern than it was, but the size is the same. So it will look really nice when it's done. And it's hard to tell on this particular wall, but this wall, because a garage door had been put into this part of the building before, and the weight of a car was sitting in this part of the room, this part of the building had settled in the past. And so that made the process of putting new trim along the ceiling, new crown molding along the ceiling, difficult, because the ceiling dips down as it gets above where that cutout in the wall is, which is the former garage door opening. So in order to make the crown molding look right, a lot of adjustment had to be done to get the crown molding to look like it's running level across there. But in reality, if you put a level up to it, it's not. It's running level with the old ceiling. But once we have drywall up there, you won't be able to tell. And so we're happy with how that turned out, considering the difficulty of dealing with a building that's way out of square. Of course, in the back, we had put a stud wall up before in order to provide more space to run wiring, and along the back of the building. And so in that case, the crown molding was brought out and run across the new stud wall rather than back where it had been. But again, once the walls are drywalled and closed up, it'll look all complete again, as if nothing had ever been changed. So that was a major adjustment to this room. You can see that the crown molding went all the way around what will be the handicapped restroom, and then it ran completely around the top of the room to the front. So what we had done in the front was we wanted to highlight where the original front doors of the store had been. Because we're painting the ceiling, the different colors on the ceiling will ultimately be covered up. And so we wanted to have trim that would stand out from the ceiling so that it would be very clear as to where the inset double doors had been. So if you haven't watched our videos in the past, you may not know the reason for painting the ceiling. A lot of people have asked, why don't we try to strip the ceiling and keep the original stained part? And the problem with that is that most of the ceiling is painted green, and that green is all lead paint. And the cost of removing it and trying to strip it down, especially given all of the beads that run on each piece of wood, and so all the nooks and crannies that you would have to get into in order to remove the lead paint, the cost is just over and above what's practical, unfortunately. So we've taken pictures, and so that we have an idea of what the ceiling looked like. But as long as we paint over everything on the ceiling, we will not have to worry about the lead paint. But again, back to the front, the white part that you're looking at on the ceiling was where the inset double doors were at. Just like the former LeRoy General Store across the street, the doors are inset from the front of the building. So again, we had molding put up there, and had it tied in with the crown molding so that it all just fits right together and really looks nice. And once that's all painted and cleaned up, that will look good. And so we'll have explanation then in the exhibit room that will tell people how the front of this room used to look. Again, it had store windows, large plate glass store windows originally on the front. So these windows are not original, but these are the windows that are going to stay. So that was a nice addition too. Of course, everything you see on the walls will be covered with drywall. Another question that we have received in the past is why don't you cover, or why don't you not cover the walls, and why don't you fix the wainscoting on the walls? Again, the walls are covered in lead paint. Everything you see that's green, all tested positive for lead paint. So that's one issue. Another issue is that on the back, we build out the wall, and over on the bathroom, this is all newer construction as well. But then in addition to that, the room has had many different alterations made by different owners over the years. So right here you're looking at one large alteration, which was a garage door for quite some time, which means we don't have wainscoting for that, and the studs that are in place are built out flush with the wainscoting that's there because it had been previously covered with drywall before. And above that you can see where an original window had been in the back end of the store facing west, and that had been filled back in, and that doesn't match at the top. They didn't take the time to fill that in. Some things on the back here, of course, are cut out, but they're covered up anyway. We had a door, originally a double door apparently on the back. Another window, larger window, was in place there. We had to cut into the wall in order to get wiring through the room. So this is one place that we had to do that. They're literally in this part of the building, this back 8 feet of this store, There's a crawl space, but it's literally not big enough for a person to even get into, nor is there any access to it. And so there was no way to get wiring back through there other than to open up the wall. And then on the front, of course, where the plate glass windows had been taken out many years ago, there's no wainscoting there at all. Where the doors had been, there's large sections of wainscoting missing, or it's mismatched in size, not just in color, but in size. Over on this side, there had been a window here and another window here, and both of those were taken out, and we put double doors in here, of course, which are loading doors. Again, we had to open up more wainscoting in order to get wiring in for fire system and for emergency lights. And then over on the other side of the room, there was a door in this corner that was not original to the building. It was something that had been added later on, around the 1930s or thereafter, when Stanley Morse lived here, and the funeral home was in this building. And supposedly the bodies were prepared on this side of the building, and then the funeral home part was on the right side of the building. So just a lot of holes are in the walls, so it really was not practical to try to use what's here and save it. But I think one of the more important things is this room is a large wooden box. If you don't put drywall on the walls, the ceiling is wood, the walls would be wood, and the floor will be wood. And that is kind of an issue with fire prevention. There's no issue as far as code for this room that requires us to have any sort of fire barrier. We just want to have a fire barrier on the walls between the rest of the building and this part of the building, and drywall will help us do that. So drywall will be going on the walls, and the next major thing done in this room was the doors that are leading into the handicapped restroom there on the left, and the door leading out into the main hall there on the right. And those are solid wood doors, and they are 4-panel doors, and we got them to match the original doors that are here throughout the rest of the house. All of those are 4-panel doors as well. So when the drywall is all put on, the trim that goes around these doors will be probably old trim that we've salvaged from around the house, and so this room will all match the molding anyway, or the rest of the house. So there'll be molding around these doors, there'll be baseboard around the room. The store didn't necessarily have baseboard around it, but it did have molding to match the rest of the house. So it will have that same thing again. In this room, the molding will be painted. The rest of the place, at least the public areas, the molding is stained. So we're glad to have gotten this handicapped restroom ready for drywall, and of course fire detection, fire alarm system. That's a strobe light and a siren, and so we have all those things all hooked up and operational throughout the building. So the handicapped restroom is, as I said, ready for drywall, and right now it's been kind of a storage area, but we have that all prepared with a sink that will go on the right side here, and then the toilet that goes over on this side. And sometimes some people might think it might be backwards to put these doors on first before we put drywall on. What we wanted to do is to make sure that things got fit into place the way that we wanted them to before introducing drywall into the picture and covering up all the studs. Because we had to widen openings and change openings to make the doors fit, we didn't want to just leave a rough opening drywall and then decide that the doorway didn't quite work in that spot. So because we're not doing new construction and we're fitting doors into a space that is older, we wanted to put the doors in first. Obviously, when we do drywall, we're going to be taking those doors off and protecting the molding and so on around those. But that's the reasoning for doing it that way. So I believe that is everything that was done in this room. So this room will be ready for drywall after we have inspection, and we're looking forward to having that done. And once inspection is done, then we can move on to drywall, and it will be complete night and day difference in this room when the drywall is on. When you look at the room now, you see a lot of holes in the walls and things cut open and so on, but really a lot of work has been done, and once the drywall goes on, it will be clean white walls, and you won't see broken up walls, and it will really make the room look a lot bigger, a lot brighter, and so that'll be pretty exciting to see that for the first time. Of course, in the past, we had leveled this floor in the back here and then put new plywood subfloor over that. This room had already had new heating and cooling system in the past, which you can see registers down the middle of the floor for that, with a return up above. And really, now that we have doors on the room and the ceiling sealed up, and we have a little bit of insulation that has to go in, the room is getting to be a lot easier to heat and cool. It maintains an actual temperature, where we had a hard time doing that before, but it's working out better, and so it's really going to be a nice exhibit room. If you want to know how this will work as an exhibit room, the basic plan right now is that you will come in the door from the hallway. There will be a slight non-permanent wall here to the left, and just a short, maybe 8 feet long or so. And to the right, of course, is the restroom door. And you will walk into the room, and around the front of the room will be large exhibits extending across the front, obviously not blocking the double doors over there. And then on the other side of this wall that I said was going to be right here to the left of the entry door. And then there will be exhibits down the far side of the wall, several exhibits there, and very similar in layout to what the exhibits at the current museum are, but with various changes in themes and making them larger and introducing many new objects. And then there'll be exhibits continuing along the back of the wall, and then in this section right here. And all of those will be lit up with the appropriate lighting, track lighting, and so on. And then the main center of the room will be an area to move back and forth for people. So there'll be a lot more space in this section. We'll be able to get a lot more on display in here um, than we were able to do down at the other building on the first floor. And that doesn't include the 2 rooms over on the other end of the house that will also be exhibit rooms as well. And that's just the first floor. That's not including the ballroom and what's upstairs. So there will be certainly a lot more to see, and so we'll be able to cover more topics, and not just LeRoy and Barkley Mountain, but we'll be able to introduce more Canton history and Granville area history into it and have a more balanced exhibit. So we're looking forward to having that opportunity. As you can see, we're moving around some large things that we have acquired as we complete the room and we move things from place to place. That's what we did when we did the Grange building. We did it very much the same way. But this room is really coming along. And since this video has gone on for quite a while, I'm going to divide this up, and we'll talk about other areas of the building in another video. But this gives you a good idea of all that's been completed leading up to now, but really starting back in December. And we're happy that we were able to get it all done before the pandemic situation occurred, so that at least when things go back to normal, we will be able to move right ahead with inspection and drywall and such. So thank you for tuning in and seeing the changes in this room, and we'll talk about other areas, the ballroom, and other changes that have been made in other parts of the building in the next video. So thank you very much.